Chapter 4. At 15 minutes before 5 p.m., Miss Boone walked into Theo's office with a folder in one hand and a document in another. Theo, she said, her reading glasses halfway down her nose, would you run these over to family court and get them filed before 5? Sure, Mom. Theo was on his feet, reaching for his backpack. He had been hoping from some corner of the firm someone would need something filed in the courthouse. Your homework is finished, isn't it? Yes, I didn't have much. Good. And today's Monday. You'll pay a visit to Ike, won't you? It means a lot to him. Every Monday for his life, Theo was reminded by his mother that the day it was in fact Monday, and this meant two things. First, Theo was expected to spend at least 30 minutes with Ike, and second, that dinner would be Italian food at Robilio's. The visit to Robilio's was more pleasant than the visit with Ike. Yes, ma'am, he said as he placed her documents in his backpack. I'll see you at Robilio's. Yes, dear, at 7. Got it, he said, opening the back door. He explained to the judge that he would be back in a few minutes. Dinner was always at 7. When they ate at home, which was rare because his mother didn't enjoy cooking, they ate at 7. When they went out, they ate at 7. When they were on vacation, 7. When they visited friends, they couldn't be so rude as to suggest a time for dinner. But since all their friends knew how important 7 was to the Boone family, they usually accommodated them. Occasionally, when Theo stayed over with a pal or went camping or was out of town for some reason, he took great delight in eating dinner before or after 7. 5 minutes later, he parked his bike at a rack in front of the courthouse and locked the chain. Family court was on the third floor, next to the probate court, and down the hall from criminal court. There were a lot of other courts in the building. Traffic, property, small claims, drug, animal, civil, bankruptcy, and probably one or two Theo had not yet discovered. He hoped to find April, but she was not there. The courtroom was deserted. The hallways were empty. He opened the glass door to the clerk's office and stepped inside. Jenny, the beautiful, was waiting. Well, hello, Theo, she said with a big smile as she looked up from her computer at the long counter. Hello, Jenny, he said. She was very pretty and young, and Theo was in love. He would marry Jenny tomorrow if he could, but his age and her husband complicated things. Plus, she was pregnant, and this bothered Theo, though he mentioned it to no one. These are from my mother, Theo said as he handed over the papers. Jenny took them, studied them for a moment, then said, my, more divorces. Theo just stared at her. She stamped and scribbled and went about the process of officially recording the papers. Theo just stared at her. Are you going to the trial tomorrow? He asked finally. I might sit down if I can get away. You? Yes, can't wait. Should be interesting, huh? Theo leaned in a little closer and said, You think he's guilty? Jenny leaned even closer and glanced around as if their secrets were important. I sure do. What about you? Well, he's to be innocent. You spend too much time hanging around the law office, Theo. I asked what you think. Off the record, of course. I think he's guilty. We'll see, won't we? She gave him a quick smile, then turned away to finish her business. Say, Jenny, that trial this morning, the Finnemore case, I guess it's over, right? She glanced around suspiciously as if they were not supposed to be discussing an ongoing case. Judge Sanford adjourned at 4 this afternoon, to be continued in the morning. Were you in the courtroom? No, why do you ask, Theo? I go to school with April Finnemore. Her parents are divorcing. Just curious. I see, she said with a sad frown. Theo just stared at her. Bye, Theo. Down the hall, the courtroom was locked. A bailiff with no gun and a tight, faded uniform was near the main door. Theo knew all the bailiffs, and this one, Deputy Gossett, was one of the grumpier ones. Mr. Boone had explained that the bailiffs are usually the older and slower policemen who are nearing the end of their careers. They are given new titles, bailiffs, and reassigned to the courthouse, where things are duller and safer than the ones on the streets. Hello, Theo, Deputy Gossett said with no smile. Hi, Deputy Gossett. What brings you around here? Just filing stuff for my parents. Is that all? Yes, sir. You're sure you're not supposed You sure you're not snooping around here to see if the courtroom is all ready for a big trial? That too. That's what I figured. We've had some traffic today. A television and news crew just left. Should be interesting. Are you working tomorrow? Of course I'm working tomorrow, Deputy Gossett said, as and he pulled and his chest puffed out a little, as if the trial would be impossible to put on without him. Security will be tight. Why? Theo asked, as though he knew why. Though he knew why. Deputy Gossett thought he knew a lot about the law, as if he had absorbed a great body of knowledge just because he sat through trials and hearings. He was often half asleep, and like many people who don't know much as they think they know, Deputy Gossett was quick to share his insight with the less informed. He glanced at his watch as if he had a tight schedule. It's a murder trial, a big one, he said importantly. No kidding, Theo thought. And while murder trials attract some folks who might be security risks. Like who? Well, Theo, let me put it like this. In every murder, there's a victim, and the victim is friends and family, and these people are naturally not happy that their victim got murdered. Follow what I'm saying? Sure. And you have a defendant. In this case, it's Mr. Duffy, who claims he's not guilty. They all say that, of course, but let's assume he's not guilty. If that's the case, then the real killer is still out there. He might be curious about the trial. Deputy Gossett glanced around suspiciously, as if the real killer could be close and might be offended. Theo almost asked, why would the real killer be a security risk if he showed up to watch the trial? What's he going to do? Kill somebody else? In open court? In front of dozens of witnesses? I see, Theo said. You guys better be careful. We'll have things under control. I'll see you in the morning. You'll be here? Sure. Deputy Gossett was shaking his head. I don't think so, Theo. This place will be packed. You won't find a seat. Oh, I talked to Judge Gantry this morning. He promised to give me great seats. Theo was walking away. Deputy Gossett could not think of a response. Ike was Theo's uncle, the older brother of Woods Boone. Before Theo was born, Ike had started a firm of Boone and Boone with Theo's parents. He had been a tax lawyer, one of the few in town. According to the scant information Theo could get on the subject, the three lawyers had enjoyed a pleasant and productive relationship until Ike did something wrong. Bad wrong. So wrong he was stripped of his license to practice law. On several occasions, Theo had asked his parents what exactly Ike did wrong, but his parents refused to give the details. They said that they didn't want to talk about it, or that they would explain things when Theo was old enough to understand. Ike was still doing tax work, but of a lesser variety. He was not a lawyer and not an accountant, but since he had to do something for a living, he prepared tax returns for working people and small businesses. His office was on the second floor of an old building downtown. A Greek couple ran a deli on the first floor. Ike did their tax work and was paid in part with a free lunch 5 days a week. His wife divorced him after he was disbarred. His he was lonely and generally unpleasant, and Theo did not always enjoy stopping by every Monday afternoon. But Ike was family, and that mattered. according to Theo's parents, though they had spent most though they spent almost no time with him. "Hello, Theo," I called out as Theo opened the door to a long, cluttered room and stepped inside. "Hello, Ike." Though he was older than Theo's father, he insisted on being called Ike. Like Elsa, it was part of his effort to stay young. He wore faded jeans, sandals, a t-shirt that advertised beer, and various beaded bracelets on his left wrist. His hair was long, wild white, and gathered in the back of a ponytail. Ike was at his desk, a wide table stacked with files. The Grateful Dead played softly on a stereo. Cheap, funky art covered the walls. According to Miss Boone, Ike had been the typical dark suited, buttoned up corporate tax man before he got into trouble. Now he fancied himself as an old hippie, anti everything, a real rebel. "How's my favorite nephew?" he asked as Theo settled into a chair across the desk. "Great." Theo was the only nephew. "How was your day?" Ike waved at the debris littering his desk and said, "The usual. Just sorting out the money problems of people with no money." "How are things over at Boone and Boone?" "The same." Though it was only 4 blocks away, Ike seldom saw Theo's parents. They were somewhat friendly, but the past was complicated. "How's school going?" "Fine." "Straight A's?" "Yes. Maybe an A minus in chemistry." "I expect straight A's." "You and everyone else," Theo thought. He wasn't sure how or why Ike thought that he was entitled to an opinion about Theo's grades, but he figured that's what uncles were for. According to his parents, Ike was brilliant and had finished college in just 3 years. "Your mother is well?" "Mom's great, working hard." Ike never asks about Mr. Boone. "I suppose you're excited about the trial tomorrow." "Yes, my government class is taking a field trip to the courtroom. We'll be there all day. Are you going?" Theo asked, but he knew the answer. Ike snorted in disgust. "Not me. I voluntarily enter courtrooms. Plus, I have too much work." A typical Boone. "I can't wait," Theo said. "So you still want to be a lawyer? A great trial lawyer?" "What's wrong with that?" "Oh, nothing, I guess." They had the same conversation every week. Ike wanted Theo to be an architect or an artist, something creative. Most kids dream of being a policeman or a fireman or a great athlete or actor. I've never seen one so taken with the idea of being a lawyer. Everybody's got to be something. I suppose. This defense lawyer, Clifford Nance, is very good. You seen him in action? Not in a big trial. I've seen him in the courtrooms arguing motions and stuff, but not in a trial. I knew Clifford well at one point, many years ago. I'll bet he wins. You really think so? Sure. The prosecution has a weak case, from what I hear. Though he kept to himself, I had a knack for hearing the courthouse rumors. Theo's father suspected that Ike's information came from his weekly poker games with a group of retired lawyers. "There's really no proof that Mr. Duffy killed his wife," Ike said. "The prosecutor might be able to establish a strong motive and arouse some suspicions, but nothing else." "What's the motive?" Theo asked, though he thought he knew the answer. He wanted to see how much Ike knew, or how much he was willing to tell. "Money. $1 million. Mr. Duffy bought a $1 million life insurance policy on his wife 2 years ago. In the event of her death, he gets $1 million. His business was not doing well. He needed some cash, so the theory is that he literally took matters into his own hands." "He choked her?" Theo had read every newspaper story about the murder and knew the cause of death. "That's the theory. She died of strangulation. The prosecutor will claim that Mr. Duffy choked her, then ransacked the house, took her jewelry, and tried to make it look as if she walked in on a burglar." "What will Mr. Nance try and prove?" "He doesn't have to prove anything. but he'll argue that there's no proof, no evidence that Mr. Duffy was at the scene of the crime. To my knowledge, there were no witnesses who can place him there. It's a very tough case for the prosecution. Do you think he's guilty? Ike cracked at least 8 knuckles and locked his hands behind his head. He thought for a moment, then said, "Probably. I'll bet Duffy planned it all very carefully, and that it went down exactly as he wanted it to. Those people do some strange things out there. Those people were the residents of Waverly Creek, a wealthy community built around a 27-hole golf course and protected by gates. There were newer residents, as opposed to the more established ones who lived in the town proper and considered themselves the real citizens of Strattonburg. The phrase, "they live out the creek," was heard often and usually described people who added little to the community and were much too concerned with money. The divide made little sense to Theo. He had friends who lived out there. His friends and clients from Waverly Creek. His parents had clients from Waverly Creek. It was only 2 miles east of the city, but it was often treated as if it belonged on another planet. Mrs. Boone said that people in small towns spend too much time looking up or to or down on others. She had lectured Theo since he was a small boy on the evils of judging people. The conversation drifted to baseball and, of course, the Yankees. Ike was a rabid Yankees fan and loved to spout statistics on his favorite players. Though it was April, he was already though it was April, he was already predicting another World Series win. Theo argued as usual, but as a Twins fan, he had little ammunition. After 30 minutes, he left the promise to stop by next week. "Get that chemistry grade up," Ike said sternly. And that's it for chapter 4.